Welcome everyone to Politics and Plastic, episode 10. We made it to 10 episodes of the show without getting canceled on the internet, so I'm feeling very good about myself. I want to welcome my two guests today. This is actually, I think, the second time I've had two guests, because our first time we did was when we had a subject on cheating. But today I would love to welcome Jen Aspden. Is that how I say it? I should probably check before the show. Good job. I was like, the P and the D together just really throw me off. So how do I pronounce it, Jen? Just
you said it exactly right. It's Aspden.
Aspden. Yep. And also Tanya Gates, who I don't think you've been on this show before, but I think I've been on your show or a show with you or something like that. So thanks. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm actually really excited to have both of you on because I think I mentioned in the pre-show, you both are coming from probably different eras, I guess is the best way to put it, and you've both been in the hobby for different times, and so I'm really interested as we get into this discussion. I mean, Jen, you started the hobby in a day before YouTube and streaming and internet, right?
Very much
me the same, right? Like I've been in the hobby from I think YouTube. It seems like it's a thing that's been around forever, but I think YouTube was invented in 2006. Like it's not that old.
It was in its infancy.
Yeah. So I started in a day where we were still using MSN Messenger and ICQ and stuff. And I think MySpace, that was probably when I started the hobby in early, that was probably even before time. MySpace, to be honest, because this was late 90s. So I'm excited to have you guys on. And one thing I will say to everyone that is tuning in is this is a topic that I think has been kind of discussed ad nauseum around the internet. There's lots of hot takes on kind of this subject. And I really want to have a really nuanced discussion on this because I think, I see a lot of Twitter fights these days on the sexism and simping is more of a joke. I don't know how much of that we're going to actually get into, but it's something that I actually think ties into sexism as well in the hobby and just in general. And it's something that I want to bring up, but probably not in the way you guys think. And that might be the one that gets me in trouble. Gets me canceled finally. So I wanted to talk about this because there's actually a recent article, I think it was Vice or I don't know, it was posted in the BC Wargamers group, and because I'm so organized, I'm gonna go to it now just to see what that the name of that article is or who actually wrote that game.
I think it was Vice.
I think it was Vice, and basically I actually thought it was, it was posted by Kelly Kim, and he basically said it was here's this article. It was Wired, sorry. And the article is titled, "Why Are There So Few Women in Wargaming?" And I actually really didn't like this article. And it was funny that this article was published because I think, Tanya, I'd asked you to come on before this article. This was June 11th is when it was shared in the group. But I think I'd already asked you on to come on for this topic before that.
Yep.
And so it was kind of serendipitous that this happened. So I want to talk about the article in a bit, but before we get into all that, I just love it if you guys could maybe just introduce yourselves for my audience who may not know either of you, and kind of how you guys, where tell me about yourselves as far as within the wargaming community. I know, and I won't speak for you. So Jen, why don't you start and just tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your history with, I guess, wargaming and this hobby.
Sounds good. So I actually started in this hobby because my husband played World of Warcraft. And when he lived on the island when we first got married, I had absolutely no interest in staying in that when we moved to the mainland. I found that it just was not as interactive as I wanted. So I had said to him, find something better for us. And he goes, well, there was this game. And the store that sells it is here in town. I went, great, let's go. And I walked around. The first Games Workshop I ever went to was the Surrey store. And I literally went, nope. Okay, let's do that one. And we wound up playing 40K together right out of the gate. And then within a year, I was working for the store. So I ran games. I was the assistant manager in Surrey for 2 years or something while I had my kids. Most of the guys that know me from Surrey remember Richard sitting in a playpen or a high chair at the end of the table while I was gaming. And then as I moved over to the island, I started running kippers. And it's just gone from there. So it was about 2006 when I started in the game.
Awesome. And I'll definitely put a link to Kipper's Melee, which is one of the annual BC-based tournaments, 40K and Fantasy and other games. I'll definitely throw a link in that because I think you just started selling kind of like pseudo tickets to
expression of interest tickets, I'm calling them.
So I'll definitely throw a link of that into the show notes. I will definitely be there. So hopefully if you guys are in the BC area or super keen to fly in from like anywhere else in the world, I mean, I'm sure that'll be great. And then Tanya, you're a little bit more probably well known on the internet like channels that I run in, because I feel like so tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your history as well, just so that everyone is aware.
All right. Well, so I'm Tanya. Some places you might know me as the War Mistress, and I make content. So I stream on my own Twitch channel. I also stream a Scarredcast Tuesday through Friday mornings. I co-host Forge's Narrative podcast. I have a YouTube channel, and I post a lot on Instagram. I sometimes write articles for Goonhammer. And I got started in the hobby around 2013, so I definitely had YouTube. And my husband had introduced me to the hobby, and
wasn't your honeymoon supposed to be at Kipper's?
My husband will not go to tournaments. He will go to like look at the armies, but he won't go to play a tournament. So I started painting and like dabbling a little bit in playing, but I had some really bad experiences online. So I sort of quit playing, and I got a different soul-sucking hobby. And when I couldn't do that one anymore, I returned to wargaming, this time to play, and it's been downhill ever since. I'm joking. It's great. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's awesome, and thanks for that. So kind of getting into this topic, and it's one. So I mentioned to Jen and Tanya before the show that I already got into one Instagram fight before the show even started over the topic, and basically people telling me that this is a pointless discussion, everything is fine, move along, like nothing to see here. And I often feel like that is a bit of the attitude in the internet circles. There's kind of, and this is just my experience, so I'd love to hear your experience, because as a man, I experience it from my side, and I've been on kind of, so I only experience it as what I see, kind of as a third party. And so the thing that I find that is the most prevalent that I see is this kind of denial. There's like this, hey, there's it's not that like I don't see that much sexism, but I see a lot of denial of sexism. And for me, that usually means that there probably is some sexism, and there is there's some toxic behavior as well. And on the other side, I see people saying everyone is sexist. So that there's this like huge like that it's a totally sexist hobby, and like it's all just white males, and like they hate everyone, and like no they don't want anyone else in the hobby. So we get these kind of extreme kind of sides of it, where it's like you have this one portion of the community that are saying everything is fine, nothing to see here. They're like Baghdad Bob, right? There are no Americans in the capital. And then on the other side, you have people saying that it's a super toxic community, that they're sick and tired of the way that they're treated, etc., etc. And obviously, from my perspective, looking in, sometimes it's hard to know where the truth is, and I'd imagine the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And I'd imagine that just like and I'd imagine just like every other community, every other hobby, every other game, every other like thing that you could be involved in, like for me, sexism isn't a Warhammer thing, it's a world thing, right? Like misogyny happens across all different walks of life. Like I experience it, and I see it in my job, in my place of work. I see it I'm a cyclist, so I see it when I cycle. I see it in sports. I see it in all sorts of different areas of life. And for me, it seems to me, and this is where you guys can come in and tell me I'm wrong, it seems to me it tracks the amount of sexism, I guess, for me as an outside observer, seems to track about the same amount that I see in other things in life. So I see lots of sexism in tons of areas of life, and I see sexism in Warhammer too. But I guess for me, I don't see it as like I haven't heard experiences from other people that outside of Twitter, which also is a bit of a I'd say like people go to Twitter to like air their grievances. It's like those things where it's like when you go to have a bad meal at a restaurant, you tell everyone, but when you have a good meal, you don't tell anyone. So it's like when you have a bad experience, Twitter, you go to amplify that experience. So where do you guys see that, like that on that scale of like everything is fine and no, this is a completely toxic community? Where do you guys each see this, and how, what are your lived experiences dealing with that?
Well, when I first started in the hobby, I was the only female that came into the store on a regular basis. So when I was hired, I was a little surprised, but I have never, in all the years that I have been in gaming, felt any different than any of the other people in the room. There's always the odd joke, but I've never felt like people were out and out treating me any different than anybody else. And that's within our circle. And I would say that all through, I've never felt that kind of sexism that I would expect to have heard about on the internet.
Okay, Jen, your video's a little bit like it was like a little frozen there for a sec, but I think your audio came in fine. So that is actually,
I was probably just sitting really still.
So that's actually surprising. That's actually surprising. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that answer. So I'm actually surprised already by the way the discussion going. And now, to be fair, and one thing that I will point out, Jen, is like you're definitely less active in the online community than probably Tanya.
Absolutely.
And so Tanya, you're kind of part of two communities. You have this real life community that's probably your local community that you play in. And then you also have this kind of online community that you're a part of, especially with like the streaming that you do. And like, you know, you're very active. I literally just saw a tweet of yours on Twitter. You're doing fundraising right now. And I'd love to hear about that at the end of the show as well. Some charity work. So tell us a little bit about your experiences and where kind of the things that you've kind of seen and experienced, I guess.
So I would say that my experience probably mirrors Jen's in that I've not come across any sexism in my like local community. Everybody's super supportive. They just treat me like anybody else. Yeah, I just they're wonderful human beings in my local community, and I've been to a couple tournaments now, and I've had really like all my best games have happened at tournaments. But online, it's a little bit different. So I will say probably 98% of my online interactions are absolutely lovely. Most people are spectacular. And then those 2% of transactions that you have are awful. So I will say that YouTube is probably, okay, Reddit and Twitter are tied for the worst, which is why I don't frequent those a lot. YouTube is probably the next worst one. And I think that the problem, the reason why you hear people say, I don't see any sexism, is because the sexism it's not necessarily going to track as misogyny. It's not going to be like, you know, I hate women or whatever. It's not going to look like that. It's going to be like, for instance, my play on tabletop game, there's a lot of like, oh, Steve could only beat a girl, or like, Steve almost lost to a girl, or, you know, she plays good for a girl, things like that. Or they make comments on your body, whereas I feel like a lot of male content creators, that's kind of a thing that's going to be off limits to them, right? Whereas the trolls and the people who make these comments, they're picking on things that they think women are going to be most insecure about. And so that's, I think, where the sexism lies. It doesn't look like sexism unless you're looking at it, like taking a step back and looking at it in like a social context. But yeah, in terms of like the local communities are amazing, and I don't think that the people who make those comments online, I don't think that they go to the game store. I don't think that they go to tournaments. I think that they're just too busy feeling miserable with themselves that they don't have any energy left to actually interact with real human beings.
Now, that's also an interesting point, Jen. And I guess the question I'd have for you is, sorry, Tanya, sorry. I was looking at Jen and I was talking to Tanya. The question I have for you is, like, you obviously interact with a lot more other creators, and you have like this big online community of, you know, all sorts of people of all sorts of genders, you know, and different kind of backgrounds. And
Yeah.
you know, do you find that speaking with them, because you're mentioning that, you know, you have this like 2%, you know, of assholes basically. And, you know, we're lucky. We live in Canada. We live in British Columbia, which I think is a fairly like liberal, fairly progressive province. And I think for the most part, we're all fairly nice. For the most part, there's definitely some assholes here. Chris Powell being one of them. But love you, Chris.
Hey, Chris taught me lots of good strategies about how to beat people with my Bretonians back in the day.
But I guess my point is like, you know, look at the majority of the player base is probably, let's say, in the US or in Europe, right? We're actually a very small portion of, you know, we're 37 million people in Canada. Now, when you say go to the US, there are probably a lot of female gamers and, you know, transgender people or non-binary, whatever, people that aren't men, that probably experience that in their local communities a lot differently than you two or even myself, because I don't really, I mean, I'm a man, I'm not a white man, but I'm a man, and like even I have experienced very little racism, but I have experienced it, but probably not as much as someone that is maybe living, you know, in the South. Just like you guys haven't experienced much of that misogyny, but I bet you there are female gamers and others in other areas of the world that do experience that real life harassment. So do you have any like shared experiences, or have you had any conversations with other people in those other areas of the world? Because generally, you know, everyone says Canadians are nice, and barring except me, I'm the one being Canadian.
Jerks too.
But yeah, do you have any stories, or do you have any kind of like, have you heard any like, I guess, shared experiences from other female gamers or people that have had those experiences in real life? Because it seems to me a lot of people are fairly nice in where we live.
I don't mind fielding this one. So, I think that maybe again overt sexism. It does happen. It does happen. I'm in like a little group chat with a few other women who are approaching like competitive wargaming, and I have heard stories in that group chat of very overt sexism in Canada. So it is a thing. I think though, like the most common sort of misogynistic sort of thing that happens to women when they first start this hobby, I've not experienced it, but I've heard it from multiple women, is this feeling of when they go into the game store that all eyes sort of turn to look at them, as in, and look at them like there's some sort of alien creature that doesn't belong there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard this story from women all across the globe. I feel so bad because I don't have any way of like giving them any advice whatsoever, because all of the game stores that I've been to, I don't know if it's because I walk in and I act like I own the place. I don't know if that's the reason why that I don't experience this, but I've not experienced that. But I do know that it is quite a common thing.
Right. Well, one thing you mentioned, go ahead, Jen, sorry.
I was just going to say, it is one of the things that I helped combat when I was at the Games Workshop in Surrey. Was when I first went in, I was there with my husband. So I was looked at a little bit different, but nobody looked at me twice. They saw I came in, and just like everybody else, they accepted that I was there. But the more I was there, the more girlfriends that came in or girls that came in or whatever, they became more comfortable because they weren't the only woman in the room.
Right.
And sometimes I actually wonder if some of it is our perception of what's going through the heads of the men in the room. Right. Because sometimes that could legitimately be what it is. I'm not saying that's happening all the time, but when I had women come in who were not comfortable there, the men in the store, the other staff that were there, let me go and talk to them because it was obvious they were more comfortable with me right out of the gate. But then it was, you know what, the more you come in here, the less uncomfortable you're going to be. The more used to you being here, they're going to be. They have nothing against you being here.
Right.
It's just uncommon. And now it's become more and more common. So we see a lot of our gaming community, and my husband and I were talking about this the other night. Our community has a lot of people in it that are in relationships. And it's become a very normal thing to take your spouse with you to Cruise Hammer, to go to different tournaments and bring your spouse along or your partner or whatever. It's not become this taboo topic anymore. It's just a normal part of life.
Yeah,
I do bring my spouse to tournaments, by the way.
Is that?
I do bring my spouse to tournaments.
Excellent. I remember in the bunker in the Surrey store, Shane actually had a girlfriend that would sit in the corner and read a book. She didn't play. She was there every time he was there for gaming and tournaments and just being there.
Right. And so Tanya, one thing that you mentioned is like everyone turns to you and looks at you like you're an alien. And actually, if you look at the demographics, it's actually probably more common to see an alien in a game store than a woman. And I think, like, so when I kind of put it into my perspective as a man, there is an actual visceral reaction, because when you look at the demographics, and I think that Wired article covers it. I think it was something like 1 out of 80, or it was like 2% of wargamers are women. And I'm on my YouTube channel. I don't know if this is real, because I hope at least one of you guys watch my videos, but there's literally the demographic bar in my analytics, and so far it's still 100% male. It's never, I haven't even tracked 1% female. So in my demographics,
mine is 100% too.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm like,
there's a couple of women on.
I know. And I'm like, no, I swear Tanya's must have seen at least one of my videos. I mean, I tell myself that. So I'm like, she's maybe that 1%. But I guess my point is, there is actually this phenomenon where females are like women are rare and in the hobby. Now, what I want to really get into is the why, right? And because that was a lot of what that Wired article covered. And my big problem with it was that they kind of they didn't do any real scientific, no real polling. They asked a bunch of guys actually why women don't play. And I think it's very unscientific, which I didn't like, because as much as I don't look it, I am a hobby scientist. One thing that, you know, and the two main reasons that they cite, the first one is financial, and the second one is sexism. That's essentially what they boil it down to. And my argument is, and I'm interested in what you guys think, is from a financial aspect, obviously, you know, there is a pay disparity between men and women. That is like a studied known thing.
I spend more money than my husband.
But there's also a pay disparity between many other groups, between people of color and white people. There's like, you know, there is, you could probably graph a chart and sort everyone into their different identities. So do white women make more than brown men or black men? Do black men make less than, you know, Asians? Like we can get into that identity politics thing, which I really don't like, because I think when it comes to the financial situation, I don't think that's like the way I guess I kind of look at it is like, if there was a pie chart of like reasons women don't play war games, the financial reason, not why they don't play it, but why there's more men in war games than women, the financial piece of that pie would be like very, very small to me, like maybe like a 1% slice. And sexism for me seems like it's probably a smaller slice than that article makes out to be, but it's probably bigger than a lot of people think. So what I'm trying to figure out is, okay, so like if the financial reason is one slice and the sexism is one slice, what are those other slices? Because for me, when I look at, like, you know, there's a lot of conversation around interests, like do women, like women don't like war games, people say, or they like knitting, or some just other nonsense stuff, or they say things like I don't know, like, and you know, one thing that I thought about is like because fucking wargamers are disgusting, unhygienic, like beasts, and like literally sometimes I don't want to war game because of like how smelly some of the other male wargamers are, and I'm like I am at least a man, and I feel like I sometimes smell like that, so maybe I'm like used to it, but like I like that's a reason for me that I don't like to war game, is because wargamers are very unhygienic, and that is a reason that might keep me out of it. Now that's just like a reason for me, but like, what do you guys think of that? Because I think there's more to it than just sexism and the financial part. So what are your thoughts?
I think that you need to look at it like, are we looking at why women who want to play are not playing, or are we looking at women in general as like a whole demographic, why they're not even interested in it?
Both. Well, I think that's essentially, so the ultimate question is, why aren't there more women in wargaming, which was essentially the title of the article. Okay. And so some because they're not interested, and some because they don't want to.
Right. So if you look at the first pie chart as being like women in general, why are they not interested in wargaming? I think in general, women, this is general,
It's okay.
women tend to be like harmony creators within their communities. So the idea of like a war game that's about conflict, I think for a majority of women is probably not going to be something that they're going to be super interested in. That's what I think. And this is coming from my personal experience as a roller derby player who asked every single woman on my roller derby team to come play War Dollies with me. And nobody said yes. So this is probably about 60 women altogether over the years that I did it, because people come and go. Not one flippin' person said yes. So there's obviously something going on in the idea of playing a combat simulation game that just doesn't appeal to women.
Right.
So for me,
And I would agree with that.
So I would say that's probably about 90% of that first pie chart, right? And maybe like the other 10% is like, it's probably not 90, it's probably 50. The other 50 is probably just women are too busy to add another hobby into their life.
They should
Right?
quit their current
Could be it
hobbies
too.
and start wargaming, though. That's my point.
But
Forget their other
but
hobbies.
it's a
Wargaming is all you need.
sucking hobby. But so then it's not even a hobby that's taking up all of women's time, right?
Right.
If you look at the demographic of women who actually play this game, it's what, 25 to 35 is like the big demographic of women who play this game.
Well, even for men, I think that's the same, because we're all old.
Well, what are women doing from 25 to 35? They're having babies. In general, the majority,
Or they're in college.
right, or both. Like, right? So this is normally the age that women are starting their families, they're starting their careers, they're doing all of this stuff. So not only do they have little ones running around or they're studying for their masters, but they also have to clean their house and they have to exercise, they have to pay their bills, they have to do like all of this stuff. It's not going to leave a lot of time for them to take up hobby at all, let alone a soul-sucking hobby.
Right. And so I guess when you look at that pie chart, one slice would be like other responsibilities, too busy. Like that would be like, you know, family making, or whatever you want to call that.
Right.
Like
I would say
rearing gremlins or something like that. So but Jen, you mentioned you had
like half and half.
But Jen, you mentioned you had literally you mentioned you were I think pregnant with your first child while you were at Games Workshop,
and
you also mentioned you literally
started in the hobby. Yep.
And you literally had him at the end of the paint table. So in your case, that wasn't a deterrent for you. So
it was tournament tables, and there's even pictures of me at a doubles midnight tournament in the Snuggly.
That sounds comfy.
It was for her. She was asleep. That was with my second daughter. You know, one of the things that I've really found as a mom, like I used to write for Belle of Lost Souls. I don't know if you guys knew that. And it reminded me that I actually wrote a thing on this. So I just went looking for it. And one of the things that at the time that really pegged in for a lot of the women I was talking to at the time was that it's the competition. Women enjoy competition just as much as men, but we're not apes about it, for lack of better word. And that was how they described it to me when I was talking to other women who were, you know, staying out of it. So treating us like equal competitors was what it came down to. Don't treat us any differently. The kids was a big thing, you know, and when my kids were little, it was a big surprise to people that I was painting a 2,000 point army in a week, because I had infants at home, but I could manage it. Like you can find the things to do. And what's the difference between a woman who's got kids at home and a single dad? Like there's no difference there as to what kind of time you can invest and all of the rest of that. But
right.
You know, those were the main things that came up when I was talking to those women. When I was writing that article at the time, that it was the overly competitive atmosphere when they would come into a game store, and the idea that they have kids and they needed to get home with the kids. Well, if you want to play, you'll find a way.
Right. So,
but as my kids have gotten older and I've gotten busier, I can honestly say that I've had less time for the hobby. so has, any other parent that's got kids.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess so, like, I guess kind of stepping back and kind of summarizing the I guess that first point, which is there are a lot of reasons including interest. I think interest is a big one. And I think there's a whole conversation we can have about how do we get more women interested in the hobby, right? So what does that look like? And maybe it's something we'll touch on later in the episode if we have time. Like, what can we do, not just as men, but as women, as everyone else, anyone that's involved in the hobby? What are the things that we can do to get them more interested in? Also, it also reminds me of, like, there's a reason that certain things are marketed towards certain people. So if Games Workshop, and they've done a lot better job in the last, let's say, 2 years, where they've had more diversity in their models, like I remember, like, the first female Stormcast came out, that was like revolutionary. The first female Guardsman, those are all like big things, all right? Sisters of Battle, obviously. I don't really look at Sisters of Battle as like some sort of like thing that they did, because they've always had Sisters of Battle. But like, once you start seeing, and then there's more like cover art of and artwork in the game, and it seems like they've have, and I love that, like, Louise Sujden is now one of the hobby presenters. She's like, she's so sweet, and she's so enthusiastic, and she's such a great painter. And like, I love that they're bringing more women into their like community presentation. So it seems to me Games Workshop is starting to market more towards women in some ways. Now, maybe whether that's adequate or not, I don't, I mean, that's a whole thing. But I don't think any of us would disagree if I said the majority of the time Warhammer has existed, it's been marketed towards men, and solely men, right? And as a result of that, you have this, like, if you take something, anything, let's put wargaming aside. If you take any activity and you market it solely towards one sex, the outcome you're going to get is that mostly that sex is going to play it. If I say take mountain biking, and I only market it towards men, then you're probably going to get a demographic in that activity where it's mostly men. Now, you'll get the odd women here, there. So for 30 years, this game has been marketed towards men primarily. And only in the last 2 years, from my perspective, has Games Workshop kind of started to understand, hey, there is actually a whole bunch of more customers that will spend money. So they're and whether they're doing it out of like a virtuous reason, or just they're just like, hey, this is like untapped market share, we just want to make more money. I mean, we'll never be able to answer that. That's probably both, right? But what we've seen, and also what I've seen anyways, is with the advent of one of the great things about the online community these days, in my perspective, is you have things like D&D has become a lot more mainstream. And I never thought I'd see the day, because I remember growing up, people were saying D&D was going to die. I remember playing D&D as a kid, and I used to like hide it from my friends. And now I'm like proud to tell my friends that I play D&D. Like, and that has also brought in a lot more people through kind of osmosis, because D&D is like a bit of a gateway to other types of these hobbies, right? So do you think that, how big of an effect do you think that has that the fact that this hobby for 30 years has only marketed towards men? How much of an effect do you think that's had on this demographic? Because I feel like maybe if from day one they had been like just as aggressively going after women, maybe it wouldn't be like 98-2, maybe it'd be like 80-20 or something like that. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I think the key here is that you said marketed to women. I think by the time a woman is like out of her teens, I think that they probably missed the opportunity. I think that if you market it to girls.
Okay, sorry, girls. I use the term interchangeably, but I apologize.
I think marketing it to girls is better, because, like I said, I asked everybody in my roller derby team to come play this, all women, right? All from the ages of like 17 to 53, and not one of them seemed interested in the slightest to come and play this game with me. So I think by the time,
do you ask them why?
yeah, they're just like, no, it's not something that I don't think so. Like, yeah. So I think that probably if you wait too long, you've lost them.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. I guess, and let me correct for the record. Obviously, it is marketed towards boys as well. So I just using those words. I wasn't really putting an age to it, but I think definitely if there was more effort put in by the various companies to market towards girls, get them at that young age. Now the question is like, is that effective? Because I would ask, like, at that age where this becomes appropriate, like, is that something where like girls would be interested in, right? And we don't know the answer because we've never seen.
It's never been done.
It's never been done, right? So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, we all just assume that no, they probably wouldn't. They're probably too busy doing whatever. But like, I don't know. I know lots of girls. Like for me, like I don't know. I used to play like Lego with my sister when we were growing up. Like I used to play house with her with like her dolls and stuff. Like I didn't really care if it was fun. It was fun, right? Like it didn't really. I didn't have this like impression of like, oh, this is for boys, this is for girls. It was just like, hey, if it's fun, it's fun. And I guess yeah. But I do think there is a
neither
piece
of
to
you
be said
have
there.
kids, right?
Yeah, no.
I cannot.
I mean,
So I have
none
3
I know of
kids.
anyways.
And my daughter is the one who says to us more often, Mom, when can I start painting? When can I buy figs? When can I
Right.
do that? You and Dad do that. Why can't I? So they all 3 of my kids have their own models, their own paints, their own brushes. They're welcome to sit down and paint them. When they first started, they were atrocious. At age 3, Richard was winning painting competitions for underage. But Jessica has really come a long way with her interest in it because she was exposed as a child.
Right.
She's now a teenager. She shares it with her friends, and guess what? They're all painting. So it very much has to be introduced to them when they're little,
Right.
while they're still developing, while they're still experiencing things, and it's not, haven't got to that point where their friends aren't doing it, so they're not doing it either.
Right. But I think that would probably apply to a lot of different things. Like I was exposed to Warhammer when I was very young, and like I don't know if someone introduced it to me. I just turned 37 last week. Happy birthday to me.
Say happy
But
birthday.
I don't know if someone introduced it to me at this age, I would even be interested. Even in my late mid 20s, like I got into it very young, and I was always into that kind of stuff, like swords and sorcery, Dungeons and Dragons, blah blah blah. So it was very easy for me to like play, and to be interested in it. But like I don't know, even if I was like in my teens, if you had introduced me to it, I would have been into it. Because my interests were very different when I was like 22. I took a big break from Warhammer around that age. So yeah. So I guess my point being, and this is something that I is part of the discussion, which is a lot of the reason I think that the demographic is the way it is because it's not like, not only is there an interest piece, which we've talked about in the past, but there's also a marketing piece, which is like, there hasn't been much effort put in to actually get girls and women into wargaming by the companies, because ultimately it seems to, and obviously that's changed over time as things have progressed, but that sometimes I'm sure to them it seems like it's like not worth the effort, because if for the same amount of marketing dollars I can get like 100 men in, or say 10 girls, or 100 boys and men, whatever, I'm gonna do whatever is gonna get me the most money. So but now it seems that's become more and more prevalent. Would you guys agree that there's been more, I guess, effort for outreach, even if I mean I don't have a daughter, so I don't know what the like marketing is to like girls, like but I would imagine there is more I guess what's the word I'm looking for?
There's more exposure simply
Yeah.
because there's women like Tanya and I who go on these shows and who do talk about it and go to these events, and we're not shy about it. We're out there.
Right.
And that makes all the difference in the world, because it's not about marketing dollars when it's a hobby like this. Because this, as we always used to tell people at Games Workshop, this is not a game for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So you only really get exposed to games like this through people who are in the game. So you want more women in the game, you want more transgender, gay, whatever you want to call people now, invite them out. Don't tell them that it's war dollies. Tell them it's a board game.
Right.
Because that's what it is. We used to describe it as a mix between chess and Risk.
Yeah.
And then you piqued people's interest because people understood what that was. If you explain it as little figurines you run around the table with, they don't get that, but they understand the strategy and the thoughts between chess. And I saw somebody posting, it looks like it was Powell actually, 15% of chess players are women.
Right.
So if you're talking about chess and strategy, and that's a fairly high number.
Yeah.
For chess players. So,
and
I don't know.
Yeah, and so like just for two points there. So to your first point, like I bought Curse City, and those box games are actually really good kind of gateway games for the unsuspecting, because if I had say like 3 or 4 of my friends and I was like, hey, do you guys want to play Warhammer? They'd be like, fuck no. But if I was like, hey, do you want to play this cool haunted board game that I bought? and I don't mention anything about Warhammer, and I open it and it's basically Warhammer. They're a lot more like open to board games, and so it is. I think there's with those the introduction of those kinds of games over the last 5 years. I think Silver Tower, the Warhammer Quest Silver Tower was like the first of that whole kind of generation of new games, like way back when. And then to your second point, chess. Like I don't know if you guys follow like Alex Botez and her sister Andrea. They're actually like there's a lot of prominent female chess like personalities, I guess, to put them, that are on Twitch, on YouTube, that are involved in that community. And I think that actually has a really strong effect to influence other girls getting into chess, because just like anything, when you see yourself in that community, so if you're, say, a person of color and you see someone of color in a movie and represented there, or if you're a girl or a woman and you see a woman successful in whatever thing you're doing, you're obviously going to be a lot more open to getting into that thing than if all you see is like men, right? Do you think there's some, maybe because we have, and Tanya, I'm sure there's people that look at what you do and look up to you and say, hey, look, this is, and I remember growing up, Jennifer Haley, she was a painter from like the early, I don't know if she still paints. I think she's I don't know if she's retired.
She did a couple of years ago.
But I remember, I think she's actually from Canada, if I'm correct. I could be wrong. But she was like a painter in like 2005 that I looked up to. And I was like, this female painter, and she was amazing. And there's a lot of really amazing, talented female painters, not as many gamers, but painters. And that's always been something that's probably been a little bit more popular, I guess, for females. Tanya, what are your thoughts on that?
On just being visible?
Yeah, just the visibility, because I mentioned how Games Workshop has more like female models. They got like there's a female Stormcast, I think, on the new edition of like AOS. So they're showing that there's like, but like for me that seems like really like not that important. That for me like I don't know, am I guess if like I don't know, maybe I'm downplaying it, but like if I saw a game that I wanted to play and it had a female on it, I'd play it if it's a good game, and if it had a male, I had a good game. So I'm curious as how things like that might influence younger people. But I guess my point is having real life people. It's not about like just having a virtue signaled female guardsman. Like you actually have to have people in the community like yourself. Well, I mean, there's lots of others. I can't think of them all off by hand. But like, yeah, don't you think that's important to have that, like those more visible personalities, I guess?
Yeah, I would. It's something that I actually struggle with a little bit, because like you said, it's like if there's a woman out there who's like successful at what she's doing and successful in a field that's like male dominated, it's gonna get more women into that field. And I do think that that is true. Just based off some of the comments and messages, very, very kind messages that I get. I do struggle with it because, like I said to you when you asked me to be on here, I was like, well, I'm not actually very good at the game, right? Like I can play, and I am actively trying to get better at the game, but like I struggle with being that role model, because like I'm not the most talented person in this hobby, but
I don't think that's important at the end.
That's what I was just going to say. That's not the most important thing at all. Like the guys no, I was always bottom tables. That didn't matter. I still showed up. I still had fun. I always had a smile on my face. I think the only time I ever really won a game was when I was in hobby camp learning to play my Bretonians for the first time, but it wasn't about how good I was in the hobby. It was that I was willing to be there and be a part of it.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I do get a lot of really nice messages from people when they've seen me play on tabletop, or they say that their spouse or girlfriend or daughter has seen me play, and it made them interested in the game. So it is obviously something that is important, but this is just anecdotally from my experience.
Yeah.
The chat is just I can't even look at the chat now because it's like it's all sorts of horrible and amazing at the same time. One thing that I will point out though, and I agree with this. So Mexon says in chat, and I agree with this, is that female models doesn't make more women want to play Warhammer, and I actually agree with that, because for me that's those kinds of like, I guess for me it feels like cheap virtue signaling. Where it's like, oh, we're gonna like throw a female on the cover. And this is why as much as I'm glad that they're doing some of these things, like having more like colored guardsmen and like female stormcasts, ultimately it's very cheap and it's not very effective in my opinion, as far as like actually, like, it's great to have, and more diversity is always good, but for me as a tool to actually get people interested in the game, I think it's basically non-existent. Like, I don't play, and again, just from my experience, I wouldn't get involved in something just because like I saw a Middle Eastern man on the cover, right? Like, it's just not like, I don't care, right? And now I also don't care about a lot of things, so maybe that's, I'm a bit unique there. But okay, I guess I wanted to talk, Tanya, you've mentioned, and I know you've talked about this in the past, but you've mentioned like, I know we've probably all kind of had this kind of sense of gatekeeping, and this whole gatekeeping conversation has happened before. And I guess I wanted to ask a little bit about, have you guys ever experienced the kind of like gatekeeping that would be associated with kind of misogynistic behavior, or has it mostly just been like general gatekeeping that people do just to everyone? Because like, I could gatekeep someone and say, hey, you can't play because your models are painted shitty, and I will say that just as equally to, you know, a guy or a girl or anyone else. But have you ever experienced gatekeeping as far as like when it comes to like in a sexist way or in a misogynistic way?
I would say probably like 90% of the gatekeep, well, maybe even 98% of the gatekeeping that I've had has been the same as any gender would have. But when I was first getting started, like way back in the day, y'all, in 2013, the gatekeeping was much more gendered back then. And I was actually told back then by idiots on the internet that I would never be able to play Warhammer because women don't have tactical brains. And
Oh,
not even once. This was multiple times. So, and that really hurt, and that made me not play for a really, really long time. But then when I came back into the hobby after that, something had changed. Something had changed completely. The gatekeeping is still there. You do still find it occasionally, but it's the exact same gatekeeping as everybody receives in the
Right.
hobby. But yeah, there definitely was a market shift while I was not in the hobby.
Right.
I don't know what happened, but
That's interesting, because like I feel like I guess what I'm finding interesting talking to both of you is like the internet version of this and the real life version of this is two different things. And I think, and here's one example. I haven't been bullied in my life since I was like 13, but I get bullied weekly on the internet. So it's like the internet, whatever like societal ailment you want to pick, whether it's bullying or sexism or whatever, basically is a concentrated cesspool of those things. And like, if it's like 1,000 times more, because it basically draws all those people, right? So for me, it's like, I know that there is internet bullying that happens and harassment, and I deal with it, and I just deal with it. And as a new streamer, I've gotten a lot of that. But and you mentioned earlier that both of you, for that most of the harassment and kind of sexism you guys have experienced has been kind of online. Would that be an accurate characterization, that it's like a lot of it's online? And I guess the question is like, what
100% of it is,
right? So what do you think the solution is to that? Because like, obviously for me as a guy, if I see something in real life, so say I'm at an event and I see someone either bully someone or treat someone in a sexist way, I will speak up and I will say something. But what is the solution to it online, where you're not, it's going to be through a DM, it's going to be in a Twitter post that maybe like there's not like an observer there that's going to see it. So what do you think, and is there a solution to it online? Like, how do we, because you mentioned Reddit as like a cesspool, and yeah, Reddit's like the cesspool armpit of the cesspool of the internet. Like, it's literally like one of the worst places on the internet. And then, you know, Twitter's just as bad, but at least Twitter, there's only 200 something characters of cesspoolness, whereas people can write full diatribes in Reddit. So what do you think the solution is to that? Because it's concerning for me as a male to hear about, I read a lot about like women's experiences online, especially on Twitter. People saying, hey, here's a DM that I got that was like really disgusting, or here is a experience that I had, whether online, like someone sent me something horrific, and some of the stuff is horrific, and it doesn't just happen in the Warhammer community, it just happens across the internet, But within our community, what do you think can be done, or is there can anything be done?
I think people just need to be self-aware, and it's not just women and it's not just men that receive it or that say it. Everybody needs to have a filter. Like you wouldn't say that to somebody's face, I can guarantee it. Don't put it in writing.
Yeah.
Like, that's my opinion.
I think that the community in general is getting better. So on the competitive 40K Facebook group, I had to end up blocking this guy because I don't believe in getting moderators involved, because I do believe that people have the right to say what they want and they have the right to expose themselves as an asshole. Um, and so this one guy was basically attacking me and calling me a liar because I was explaining about my situation with basically those early online assholes. And he was basically calling me a liar. And the entire community came to call this guy out. And it was like, just because you don't see sexism doesn't mean that it's not there, and doesn't mean that she's not experiencing it, and you don't have the right to call her a liar. And I think that that is just what needs to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you see weird stuff like that on the internet when somebody's being brave and like explaining what has happened to them in their experience, just like maybe, stand by them. Like, you don't even have to agree with what they're saying, but you need to like protect their ability to say it, if that makes sense, right? So anyway, I had to actually end up blocking that guy just because he kept like tagging me and stuff and just being like an aggressive a-hole. But yeah, I think it's really hard for a lot of women and transgender people and people of color, but at the end of the day, like, they're just people on the internet, so you can block them or you can tell them off. You can't say, "Oh yeah, whatever, buddy," and like not give them any other time of day. And I tend to have really thin skin, but the more you experience these jerks on the internet, the tougher your skin gets every day. So,
Right. Well,
yeah.
one thing that I was gonna one thing that I was gonna mention up, specifically on the internet is like, and kind of maybe this kind of goes into our subject line simping, which is unwanted attention and sometimes wanted attention. So one thing that I've experienced, and this is probably the part where I'm gonna get in trouble. So this is probably where I'm gonna get canceled. But this phenomenon of simping where a lot of, and I noticed this in our community to I think it's a, so I think when I see this, I think it's a really weird phenomenon and I don't understand it. But maybe, and I'd love to hear your perspective, because I remember, Tanya, reading, I think, one of your stories where you mentioned like you're getting like all these DMs all the time. And I was like, that's really bizarre. Like, what are all these people saying to Tanya? And she was like, I'm turning off my DMs or something like that. And I was like, that's really bizarre. And I was like, what are all like people saying? Right? Like, I didn't understand, because no one ever DMs me. So if you guys want to slide into my DMs, feel free. But one thing I have noticed,
send you all of the messages.
Yeah, send me all the messages. But one thing I have noticed is that there's kind of this phenomenon, and I notice it in our community, but I especially notice it in other, like, I'd say like nerd communities, or I don't even know how to describe it, communities where women are actually a very small percentage of the population. You end up with a lot of fans, I guess that's the best way to put it. But like, when I look at so I follow quite a few creators on Instagram, on YouTube, and one thing I notice is like I follow like Golden Demon painters that post like literally like beautiful, like award-winning stuff, both male and female. And the female ones, they get like 3 times as many comments. They have 4 times as many followers. Like, there's this weird phenomenon, and I'm not sure what it is, because I look at the profiles and I'm like, they seem like this person, especially when it comes to, say, painting, for instance, and there's a lot more male painters than female painters as well. But there's this weird phenomenon where, like, if you're a female, then like, because there's so many males in the hobby, they're attracted to you, not like physically, but like they'll like follow you, or they'll like join your community. There's this like weird, does that make sense what I'm describing? Like, I just feel like there's this weird disparity of like, I don't know, it's called popularity, I guess. And it's not necessarily a good way. Like, it's like almost unwanted attention, where it's like you all of a sudden now have thousands of followers that are just following you because of the fact that you're female. Is that something that you've ever, does that make sense what I'm saying?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so as somebody who, I would say Instagram is probably like the thing that I know best. I will say women just know how to use it better. Straight up.
Okay.
It is social media, and women tend to be better socially than men are. So, in general, women are going to be better at social media. And these are generalizations that do not apply to everybody. But in general, that's how it works. On top of it, women on social media, especially on hobby social media, tend to put themselves out there more and interact more with the people
I
who are
definitely noticed that.
interacting with
I
them.
definitely noticed that
Yes.
because I don't see much stories from like Richard Gray talking me through
Exactly.
his life. I just got like this nice model.
Exactly. Right, like if you look at Demidov, for example, amazing artist. Do we even know what his face looks like?
No, I don't know. I don't know who
No.
that is.
And studies have proven that you don't know Demidov? Oh my god, I'm gonna send that to you later.
See,
I'll have to send it to me too.
I'm a bad Instagram user. I just mostly spam like YouTube thumbnails on my Instagram these days.
Okay, so studies have shown that media, this includes social media, that has a human face on it gets more engagement than media that does not have a human face on it.
Absolutely.
Men are less likely to put their own face on their social media, and so therefore they get less engagement. Less engagement equals less relevancy in the search. And that's how it works. It has nothing to do with people just liking your content because you're a woman.
That's not what I said. So don't mischaracterize what I said. I didn't say it's just because of that. I just said that it seems to me there's a tendency for males to follow females more readily because of that. That doesn't mean it's the only reason or that they're not interested in the content. Like as I said, like I follow I don't really follow that many even people on social media, but like when I look at follower accounts and then I look at like, so Instagram for me is like a picture. It's a picture, like, what is it, like a picture site? You put pictures on it? I'm so stupid. This is my bad Instagram. I can't even explain what it is. But I'm like, okay, so like for me, Instagram, like especially hobby Instagram for me, it's like I like to go look at painted models. That's what I like to use Instagram for on my hobby account. And what I notice, and this is just an observation of me, and this is why I'm trying to have this conversation, is what I notice is that all the female content creators, irrespective of the quality of the painting, often have a lot more followers and comments and engagement than the males. Now, whether that's due to what you just mentioned, right? 100% of the fact could be, but I'm saying, is there a phenomenon here where men are more, and this is where it comes to the simping part, where it's like where men are more inclined to follow other females because of this parasocial relationship maybe they're trying to form with other females online versus other males? Because like men aren't going to follow me trying to like chat me up, but they might, a bunch of men might follow a female, especially if the site is majority male, in order to like create that parasocial relationship. That's what I'm trying to understand, is like, is that a phenomenon? Because I sometimes feel like when I look at the data from like the actual like follower counts, and then I compare it to like, say, the Golden Demon winners versus people that are like brand new into painting, it seems to me there's something more to it there. I'm not trying to like, I'm not trying to I guess characterize it as like, oh, it's just because of this or just because of that. I'm just trying to say is what goes into that, because there is this like it seems to me there's this phenomenon, and I see it on Twitch as well, right? I see it in other communities as well, where because you're like there's this like, and this is where the simping comes in, which is like men often try to create these parasocial relationships with females, and as a result they seek them out. So they're not just like accidentally following these people because they like their work, but they're actually saying, hey, I'm gonna go follow female accounts because I want to, I don't know, flirt with them or whatever. I mean, I don't want to characterize it because I don't do that stuff.
Would you say that I have a big Instagram account?
I don't know. I don't even know how many followers you have.
I don't know, like 7,000 something.
I mean, for me it's big. Like relatively big. But then like excellent. Also like I look, there's a lot of other ones that are like when I look at the average median of hobby accounts that I follow, it's probably closer to around the 2,000.
Right. So let's just go with this. So I have a fairly big niche hobby account, and I have a very gendered username on my account, and I occasionally post selfies occasionally. It's about once in every 20 or so. Because you got to put your face on there in order to drive engagement. But by what you're saying, I would have had to turn off my DMs because I was getting flirted with.
No. That's not. I think you're mischaracterizing what you're saying. I'm just saying. I'm not saying because you're getting flirted with. My point being.
Because I don't get anybody flirting with me.
No, I know. I use flirting is maybe the wrong word. I just saying this parasocial relationships. These. Yeah. And again, I could be totally wrong. That's why I brought it up, and I said I'd probably get me in trouble. This is just something that I thought I had noticed. Where
okay, so
there is
let me approach this.
It seems to me that there is something going on there, and I don't know what it is. I don't know how to describe it.
Okay, let's approach it a different way then. So there are women on Instagram who mostly post sexy selfies with like the occasional like orc boy right here, right?
Maybe I should start doing that. Sexy selfies with my painting.
Because we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it, right? So those women, those accounts, they do exist. They don't get the same kind of engagement and they don't get the same kind of numbers as I do, as my friend Quipster does, who is a handsome gentleman. I think that maybe gender does come into it, but it's not. I don't think these people are following the women because they're women. I think that they're following people because they want to make a connection with somebody else in the hobby. And women, it's easier to make that connection on social media because women tend to be more social.
Right.
That's all that I think it is. I mean, there might be the odd creeper who goes around and like hits on hobbyists. I haven't found that person yet. I don't know if it's because I'm like older and like
I might be importing,
or I don't know, but
I might be importing some of my views from like non-hobby social media because I have two accounts. I have like my painting account, which is literally just hobby, and then I have a personal account. And I have a lot of female friends. In fact, most of my best friends are female, and the amount of like screenshots I get of like creepy ass DMs of like people just like super like unwanted attention, people following them, like they're like just for that kind of stuff is like shocking. Like I'm like on their normal Instagrams, like they don't do hobby. So maybe I'm importing this like from like non-hobby world, this like thing where there's lots of creepy guys that follow women for like whatever nefarious reasons in real life. That happens all the time because I literally, my friends send me DMs from guys like hey, like dick pics, like fucking all sorts of gross things, and I'm like wow, that's like I know, but I guess my point is like I'm not saying you are, but my point is I think maybe what I'm doing in my head is I'm importing that same mentality into our hobby space, and I'm thinking, well, maybe some of that is also carrying over into the hobby space where that's happening as well. And I don't know, like I know your experience, you just explained it, but I would bet you there are other female content creators that have had that kind of unwanted attention. I think so. I'd be weird. It'd be surprised if that didn't happen, I guess, given the internet.
So I have another friend who has an even bigger Instagram account than me, and the only things that I've seen from women with those accounts is like people looking for sugar babies.
Yeah.
But that's like a business transaction that they go into it with, and it's not even like, hey baby, it's just like it starts off with like, I'm looking for a sugar baby and this is my contract for you, right? And it's like that's pretty weird, but at the same time, like if they say no, these people leave them alone and they go off to the next one, right? So but I've not had that. I'm not too sure what I'm doing differently, but yeah, I've not had like unwanted like weirdos out of nowhere. I don't know.
Yeah, Dudu makes a good point, and this is maybe where I'm coming from. So I have LinkedIn as well because I'm a quote unquote apparently a professional, and a lot of my female friends complain that guys use LinkedIn as basically a dating app. So my question is like, is there a phenomenon of guys using things like Twitter, Instagram, and then finding women that maybe have similar interests and then trying to like use it as a dating app? Like, does that happen? Is that a thing?
I see that more out of Facebook than I do anything.
Okay, so maybe they are coming at it from that angle, but it's not tracking that way. I don't know.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm happy because I was
Like-
worried that like, you guys are getting like harassed from like a bunch of creepy like nerds who are like too socially awkward to actually like talk to people, and like their only way to connect with women is through like creeping them on social media. Like that was like my theory, my working theory.
My whole experience with the game in all the years I've been in it, whether online, whether in person, and like you said, I have much less online presence than Tanya does. I really only go online to deal with stuff for kippers. Never experienced any of that stuff, none of it. And I have to say, out of all the stories I've heard from other women in the hobby, from other guys in the hobby, of things that their girlfriends experienced, I am proud to be part of our gaming community, because our gaming community does not have that stuff. Not to the way that I would even think about it. I have never worried about going to an event. I've gone to lots of events on my own without my husband. I've gone and never had a single instance where I felt uncomfortable.
Right. And I think that's wonderful, and I am happy that that's been your experience. I'm curious, and this is maybe I'll do a poll or something on the YouTube, but like I'm curious, and by 0% women, I'll have to 0% women visit my YouTube page. But I'm really curious, like if that's consistent in across like the community as a whole, because when you read online, it seems to me that there's this like I always hear talk of like safe spaces in the hobby and stuff like this, and I'm like. And for me, I'm someone that's like, I'd like to think extremely welcoming, extremely friendly in real life. Yeah, I can be a bit of an asshole online, as we mentioned, right? My asshole comes out. But in real life, I'm extremely welcoming, and like I would love to have more of everyone in the hobby, like women, transgender people, people of color, etc. Because I do think it is a very privileged hobby. It's expensive. It's not for. This isn't a thing where like there is a point where if you can't afford it, it's hard to get in the hobby, even though there's ways to do it, but. My point is like I'm curious if that's the experience of the majority of the population, or if there is actually communities out there, and because it feels to me when I read the internet that there's actually in real life there are communities that are like toxic and rude and gatekeeping or whatever in real life. It's not just these online incidents, that there is actually this thing in real life. Like that seems to me. If I'm reading it correctly, and from what I read online, because a lot of the experiences I read about online don't actually happen online. They're like, hey, I went into my game store and the guy was like, are you here for your boyfriend, right, or something like that, right? And then people are, they're kind of off put by that. It's like, no, I'm here for me, right? So I don't know if that's coherent.
I haven't had that experience.
Right.
I hear that all the time from other women, and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how I would deal with that.
So for the 0% of women watching, if you have had any of those experiences,
I would
please slide into my DMs.
No. I've got two of my.
I know. I do see you have some of your friends here, so I appreciate that. Okay, so I'm just being aware of time, and I guess to wrap up the show is I want to maybe end the show with. So what can we do, men especially, or to make the hobby more welcoming? Because I feel like, or at least make sure that like we're not making uncomfortable situations. Because for me, I feel like I'm fairly harmless and I'm super welcoming, but I know there's a lot of talk of, and I've been reading chat it's gotten a little bit heated in some areas. And so already there's like the chat's kind of getting a little bit heated, but like what can be done across all, like what can we do essentially to make it more welcoming? And is there anything that you can any advice you can give to guys or anyone else that is to help make the hobby more welcoming, to be better allies for all people? Because like sometimes I feel like maybe they just don't know. They just don't know what kind of behaviors, what kind of things we should be doing.
The exact same stuff that you would do for a new guy coming into the store.
So absolutely nothing different.
We're just people.
Okay, so you see a new person that walks into the store. You've never seen them before. I mean, maybe you walk up and say, "Hi, my name is Jim.
Yeah.
Would you like to have a game sometime?"
So
basically
yeah.
Look at this cool thing I painted. I'm really proud of it. Like it's the exact same stuff that you would do.
I guess where I struggle with it, and maybe this is my struggle, like what I read online, it's like when I read online, and the reason I want to have this topic, like, and you guys saw some of the comments on the thread, there was people saying that this is like the community's toxic, that it's full of like white supremacists, that there's like it's misogynistic, it's all white men, da 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 da. So there's this characterization of our community. Sometimes I read about online, and sometimes maybe I'm like, is it really that bad? But then I talk to you two, and you guys are like, no, it's like things are for the most part totally normal and totally fine. So is it that your experiences, what do you guys think? Do you think it's because your experiences are atypical or typical, or what do you guys, where do you think the truth lies? Because it's hard for me to believe that all the people that are having these like horrible online experiences are not like authentic. Like, I generally like to believe people when they tell me something that's bad that's happened to them. And I also don't want to be dismissive, because one of the big problems I find online is someone does have a really bad story, and then everyone comes in and says, oh, it's not a problem, right? And so for me, it's irresponsible of me to just be like, yeah, Tanya, Jen, it sounds like everything's perfect, so guys, there's no problem, let's move on with our lives. You know, am I missing something here, or where do you think the truth lies?
I think it can be toxic in some communities if it's allowed to.
Yes.
But I think in our gaming community, everybody is aware enough that they do not allow it to be a problem. Right. Whether that's conscious or subconscious, like I said, it's not been an issue in all the years I've been in this gaming community.
Okay. Nothing to see here.
I feel like so one thing that you could do if you want to make your spaces more welcoming to maybe new female players who are coming into your sort of community, one, ask them to play a game. Don't wait for them to make their introductions, but go up and introduce yourself first, and then introduce them to everybody else that is at the store or at the game club, wherever you're at. I think that goes a long way to making somebody feel normal within the group, right? The other thing too is if you do notice that there's somebody staring, I don't know, throw a dice at them or something and be like, "Hey, buddy, you got an issue?" Like I would probably call that out, because it is weird. I have not experienced it, so but if somebody was staring at me, that's probably what I would do. Be like, "What? Take a fucking picture." Right? But there are some women who cannot do that for whatever reason in their past. They can't do that. I
wouldn't address it at all. I'd just ignore it.
Right? But like if this is your friend doing it, or somebody who's in the community, and you feel like you could draw attention to the fact, because some people don't realize they're doing it.
Yeah.
Right? Some people really have no idea that they're doing it. So just like drawing attention to it in some way and be like, snap them out of it, I think is a really good thing to do in that case.
It's like the kid that you got to take aside and let them know that they need to go put on some more deodorant. Just point it out.
What I was going to say is my one piece of advice to make this hobby more welcoming is to take a shower, wear deodorant, and wash your hair, and wash your clothes, please. Do your laundry, because like for me, that probably puts off more people of the hobby than any other aspect, as far as I'm concerned.
Please don't just put cologne on top. Like, please wash everything.
My first 2 years of kippers, I had terrain pieces that were legitimately air fresheners. Painted to look like big rocks. They were in the middle of every table.
I sometimes, because like especially like sometimes when the gaming hall is really hot, sometimes I'll go change between rounds, because like especially if you're playing like competitive, like a really intense game, it's like I get hot, I get like flustered, right? Like, so sometimes even between rounds I'll go and like freshen up, because I'm like, wow, I'm like literally like I'm like a mess. And also my one last piece of advice for this, and then I'll hand it over. Whoever decided to invent these fucking jerseys that stink, that never get rid of the smell. I don't know what they're made of, like fucking Cool Max, some fucking like synthetic polyester shit. These sports jerseys that like people wear as like their club shirts, and they literally stink so bad, and they never not smell. Please just go burn those and just wear like a normal cotton shirt that like washes, please. Sorry. I hate them. I'm like, why do people invent this material? It's literally the worst material in the world. It's sticky and it stinks.
Tell me how you really feel, though.
I literally want to like burn every one of those. I have 2 of them too, and I hate them. I hate wearing them because I was like, I don't want to wear this. It stinks. Anyways, Tanya, what were you going to say? Final thoughts?
I don't know. I'm shook after that,
All right.
that rant. On
Okay,
Chris.
Jen. Final thoughts. I guess not final thoughts, but like, tell us a little bit about Kippers quickly, if you want to throw in a plug there.
Oh, yeah, you got about 3 minutes before I got to run away. So, Kippers is expected to happen this year. We're waiting for that official lifting of restrictions for the venue, but I do have a backup venue in mind. We've been running since 2012. And you can thank the likes of Chris and Shane, because when I moved over here, they went, hey, you guys, you should run an event. And I went, yeah, I'll look at that next year. And they went, no, if you do it this year, we'll come. So I did it. 2 months. I think I was a month after I moved to the island. It was insane. But we've been running ever since. And it's a blast. We're looking for some more TOs this year. I've got somebody for 40K for sure. I'm looking for somebody for Age of Sigmar and War Machine still. But yeah, we're going to have, we've got those expression of interest tickets up right now. They're from the top. That just helps me to know what spacing I am going to need, because if I have 60 players as opposed to 200 players, it makes a big difference. And then, yeah, I'll get the tickets up just as soon as those restrictions lift.
Awesome. And Tanya, where can people find you? And tell us a little bit quickly about the charity work that I know you're involved in some charity work that I should probably done my research for, but tell us a little bit quickly before we have to go.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, another Twitch channel, Forged Narrative Podcast, Goonhammer. Yeah, you can find me like everywhere. And on June 26th, I will be having a game of Warhammer 40K on TTS that is going to be streamed. It is for charity, so if you donate $50, you can either help or hinder one of the players who is taking part in this. So it's myself against Jamie from the Red Path. And our celebrity commentators are Scary from Scarcast and JT from Play on Tabletop. And it's just going to be absolute chaos. It's going to be so much fun. I can't wait.
Awesome. And
I've
if
already crashed my goals. So.
And yeah, so thank you for that, Tanya, Jen. Thank you so much for coming. And if anyone was watching this in the future and you have had experiences, please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear people's experiences. Slide into those DMs, or just forward me your DMs if you don't want them, because no one DMs me. But yeah, this is Politics and Plastic. Make sure to like and follow the channel on YouTube and Twitch if you guys are enjoying the content. Thanks so much for listening. You guys have been wonderful,